P8.2 Contact and non-contact forces. We've got two types of forces here. You need to be able to identify them and tell the difference between them. You also need to be able to explain what they are. So contact forces is anything that you need to physically touch to be able to move or change the direction of something. So it's pushing, pulling, carrying. Non-contact forces is a little bit more abstract. So imagine two magnets, they either attract or repel. You don't have to touch one magnet with the other. You can move the other without physically touching them. And that's a magnetic force, so that's non-contact. Another example is gravity. Gravity doesn't have to touch you, but it's a force that will pull you towards the center of the earth. So it's pulling us down. Okay, so bear that in mind when we come to answer the questions that follow. In terms of identifying the largest force here, it's the size of the arrow. So the greater the arrow, the bigger the arrow, the greater the force. Okay, so this car is moving forward here with a greater force than this one. So we identify the objects with the greatest force here, here, and there. Okay. Now when we come to the questions, first one here, if we're talking about high diving, so we're diving from a 10-meter board, 27-meter board, and there are forces acting on you as you jump. So pulling you down is gravity. It's a non-contact force. It's not touching you, but it's still causing you to move, change direction, or speed up. Air resistance is a contact force because as you fall, you are bumping into the air particles. So they physically touch you, although we're not really aware of this because it happens all the time. Every time you move, you're walking through air, you're pushing air particles out of the way. And the next question asks about opposite forces. The gravity is pulling us down, the air resistance effectively is trying to push us back up. If we look at the same concept, but this time you're diving into the water, the gravity is still the non-contact force. It's not touching you, it's causing you to move. The water resistance is the contact force. So these are the water particles that you're bumping into as you enter the water. They're trying to push you back up again. Okay, last part. Explain why in terms of forces there is a risk to head injury. If you're jumping from a height of 27 meters, as you fall from a greater height, you fall faster. You're speeding up, you're accelerating. Therefore, when you hit the water, you're hitting the water with much greater force. So there's a bigger risk of head injury. And finally, on the summary, forces can change the direction of an object. They can change its speed and state of rest. So you can either start something moving that is stationary, you can make something speed up, you can make it slow down, and you can change its direction, all by using a force. They're measured in newtons. Contact forces only act when objects are touching. Newton's third law says objects interact, they exert equal and opposite forces on each other. So effectively, any object that's moving or stationary has forces that are equal and opposite, acting in opposite directions. Well, I hope that gives you enough explanation.